So over the last 30 years now, I've helped to establish 250 schools, educated large numbers of children, mainly girls. Hi everyone. Thank you so much to Chip for inviting me to speak today. If I come across as a little emotional, it's because last night I found out that several of the families that I've been taking care of for the last 2 years are highly at risk. Pakistan announced that it's planning to deport Afghans by the end of this month if they don't have current visas, and they've been refusing to renew visas for the last several months. So as I'll show you, we've had an immense success for the last 2 years in evacuating hundreds of Afghans. We have a number who are still left behind, waiting for their asylum in Australia and different countries. And if we don't raise basically $20,000 in the next couple of days, these women will be deported, sent back to an uncertain fate in Afghanistan. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. And also on my life journey, Chip asked me to talk about how I came from being an investment banker to spending many years of my life in conflict zones and devoting my life to the empowerment of women, and why. So I mentioned that I kicked off my career in investment banking. I started off in the biggest investment bank in the city back in the 80s. And after the stock market crash of October 87, I decided that I wanted to have a life filled with meaning and purpose. So at that time, the greatest number of aid workers were concentrated in Peshawar, which was the capital of the Northwest Frontier Province. It's now known as KPK in Pakistan, that had the highest concentration of missionaries, mercenaries, and misfits. And I decided I probably would do better as a war correspondent or an aid worker than as an investment banker. So I took off to Pakistan and ended up setting up a school in Chitral, a landlocked valley in the Hindu Kush, right up on the Afghan-Pakistan border. At the time, it had the highest rate of female and infant maternal mortality, and this was because there was only 2% literacy among the local women. So the local deputy commissioner tapped me on the shoulder when I was 25 years old. It was my birthday, actually, sitting under a mulberry tree eating birthday cake in the Hindu Kush mountains. And he asked me if I would help him set up a school, and I thought it was kismet, fate. So I agreed to do that, and the school remains a bulwark against the rise of radical Islam. It's nestled between Nuristan, which is an extremely sort of warlike province in Afghanistan, and Swat, which is the valley in the Hindu Kush where Malala was famously shot by the Taliban for her support of girl child education. So over the last 30 years now, I've helped to establish 250 schools, educated large numbers of children, mainly girls, launched a business which I'll tell you a little bit about, an impact business which employed many, many artisans and moved Nepal's GDP in the right direction. And most recently, I worked with some people in the room, actually, I'm going to name check you later, to evacuate some of the most at-risk Afghans. And my life's journey was inspired by a photograph. I think almost all of you will recognize this green-eyed Afghan girl who was the cover shot of the National Geographic many times in the 1980s, actually. I think 3 times she was put on the front cover. The photograph was taken by Sharbat Gula, and I was 21 when it first came out. And there was something about that look in her eye, the intensity, the defiance, the proudness, and also the fact that even though she was 11 years old, she had obviously seen far too much of the world. And I just felt somehow she captured a piece of my soul, and I decided that I would devote part of my life to helping Afghan girls like her, and I have. So I was able to fund these schools through the proceeds of my Pashmina business. Some of you in the room will remember the Pashmina boom. Well, I was the Pashmina queen. And So I brought that back, having discovered it in a little workshop in the Himalayas, and got it in shops all over the world, Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf Goodman, Fred Siegel here, Harrods in London, and it was the best-selling brand in Harrods for over a decade. It was launched on the shoulders of Christy Turlington, who was the biggest supermodel at the time in British Vogue. And I always felt it was somehow God-sent, really, because it freed me up and enabled me to do what I felt I'd been put on the planet to do, which was to promote peace in areas of conflict through education and empowerment of women, and also enterprise opportunity for them. So in 2007, I was approached by Prince Charles's NGO, Turquoise Mountain, now of course King Charles, and I was told that I had to go back to the Hindu Kush, back to Kabul actually, to set up a jewelry school. And I wriggled and resisted, and they wouldn't hear any of it. They told me I was the only person who could set up a jewelry school because I had this background of having set up all these other schools. And because of my track record in fashion and branding and marketing, they felt I could also develop international markets. So I returned to Afghanistan in the coldest winter on record, wrapped in pashminas, and set up the jewelry school in short order, launched a brand at Paris Fashion Week that autumn, and then went on to establish, with the backing of the US Department of Defense, Future Brilliance, which is a 501c3 here in the US, and it's also registered in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and in Britain. And we ran the first ever digital literacy training program for girls in the country. We also did advanced jewelry and gem cutting training to give these women jobs that they could do at home. So the lady who's bent over her piece of paper there with the turquoise and the lapis beads is Khala Zainab. Khala Zainab is an extraordinary woman. Once we had trained her, she went back to her village in the north of Afghanistan, and she hired 1,200 people. All the men in her village and the village next door were making these beads and supplying them to Ayenda, the jewelry brand we helped these women establish. She, right now, is resting in our safe house in Pakistan, desperately in need of heart surgery, and we need to raise $3,000 to keep her alive over the coming weeks, basically. So at a certain point, my family got fed up with me running around in a war zone. My brother Hugo was made a Minister of State at the Foreign Office, and I was put on a hit list. I was informed by Indian intelligence. I'd upset the Pakistanis because I was trying to stem the flow of illegally mined gemstones into Pakistan, and it didn't bother me at the time that it was fueling $1 billion trade in Pakistan. I wanted to restore the value chain to Afghanistan in order to help stabilize the country so that when we left, as inevitably we would be leaving people behind with real jobs. But after I heard that, and I was basically grounded, my brother called me into the House of Commons and told me no more. So I thought, well, what can I do now? And so I thought, well, maybe I should go back into finance. And of course, social impact investing had really come forward. And so because I'm a woman and I do things collaboratively, I built the GEDI network, which is an impact network, an impact investing network. GEDI stands for Gender Equity Diversity Investments, and it comprises some of the movers and shakers from Silicon Valley all the way to Pakistan in private equity, venture capital, building companies, knowing how to exit them, as well as niche experts in AI, blockchain, and all the areas where we were seeking to invest. But then, in August 2021, Kabul fell. And I started getting telephone calls from all the girls that we had educated and trained and employed. And there were quite a few of them. And they kept coming thick and fast. And I had a choice to make. Do I launch my venture capital fund, or do I put it on hold for what I thought would just be a couple of months and respond to this appeal? So, of course, we responded to the appeal. And the GEDI network, instead of launching the fund, raised $500,000 in 2 weeks through a GoFundMe campaign, chartered a plane and moved 400 Afghan women and children and their families through Taliban checkpoints to the north of Afghanistan, where the plane was held hostage for 3 weeks by the Taliban, and we then had to trickle them through into Pakistan. We won't go into how we did that. And we established safe houses in Pakistan, which I've been running and operating on a volunteer basis for the last 2 years. We were also able to provide food. We reopened an orphanage in the north of Afghanistan that had been closed because there was no funding available for them. And we provided online trauma counselling for the women who were trapped in safe houses and didn't know if they were going to be able to feed their children in the next 2 or 3 days. So we evacuated some people directly from Afghanistan, and we brought others over into safe houses in Pakistan. And we developed a holistic response to really take care of them mentally, physically, emotionally, because I realized they were going to be there for quite some time, and I didn't want them lying idle and getting bored and aggressive, which is what can happen, especially with Afghan men. So we put them into training. We upskilled them, we gave them ICT skills, we gave them mental health support, we taught them yoga, breath work, and all the things that you need to come back into your body, because many of them were suffering from trauma. We introduced them to group therapy, which they initially resisted enormously. The men resisted it forever, but the women eventually learned to trust each other enough to start sharing the troubles that they had been through. Because they were desperately needy, they were always heading off to the hospital to worrying about toothache or leg ache or neck ache or whatever, and it began to be rather expensive. So we introduced them to basic nursing skills, and suddenly the hospital bills stopped, and they learned to take better care of themselves and their families. The other reason we gave them training in nursing is because, of course, all over the world there's a shortage of healthcare workers, and I wanted them to have certified skills in the kinds of things that countries like Australia, Britain, America, and so on have a skill shortage for, to help them qualify as skilled immigrants. Because especially in the wake of the Ukraine crisis, no one wanted Afghan refugees anymore, so it was critical to really find any way possible to get them through this hurdle. The girl on the left is Najiba. She's a Taekwondo champion. She's also a fighter pilot who was trained by the US Air Force. And she's one of the girls that I'm most worried about at the moment. More of her later. Because I wanted the children to feel accepted and somehow admired when they eventually went to their countries of asylum, I gave them the kinds of skills that would enable other children to respect them, like how to build a robot. And we also gave women some introduction to coding and robotics. We also trained them in computer skills, basic computer skills if they didn't have them. We provided every family with at least one laptop, and we gave them skills in social media marketing to try and encourage them to become financially self-sufficient, because we didn't know how long this was going to go on for. And this approach is actually working reasonably well, because we're starting to get skilled immigration asylum status for some of the girls who've been through our program. Girls like Mursal Azizi here on the left, who actually designed this deck last night from Sydney, Australia, where she is now working for the leading Australian marketing company. She went through our digital literacy training a decade ago, and then through graphic design training. She's amazing. I'm so proud of her. Women like Rukhsana Rahimi, who was, I actually had to lock her in a bedroom for 24 hours because her family in Afghanistan were pressurizing her to come back. And I knew that if she went back, she would be killed, and they would take her children and then kill her, because she had run away from them because she'd been forced to marry a Taliban relative, and the whole thing was a disaster. After 24 hours of being locked in her room, she agreed that she needed to remain alive with her children, and we managed to find her asylum to Australia as well, and she's now there beginning to retrain as a locally certified midwife that she is. Now, most famously, we evacuated the green-eyed Afghan girl, the woman who inspired my life's journey, and we did that with the help of the Italian Secret Service and with Louis Sohoyas, who should be here in the audience. Louis, are you here? Oh, no. Well, Louis helped raise the money, which was around $60,000 to pay for passports and visas and everything for Sharbat Gula and her 13-strong family, basically, to get to Italy. So everything that I've ever done has been in collaboration with other people. I don't take personal credit for this at all. What I do is somehow manage to persuade other people to do lots of amazing things, and with that collaborative help, one can move mountains. So one of the proudest moments of my life was actually meeting Sharbat Gula in the summer. In June this year, I took her and her family out to lunch in Viterbo, outside Rome. She looked at me and I looked at her, and we'd never met in person before, but I told her how much her life had, inspired mine, and what had resulted from that photograph, which she felt it ruined her life. So I told her that tens of thousands of girls have been educated because of it, and that she should feel proud. And she's settling in, coming to terms with Italian ice cream and pasta, which she doesn't really like, but, such is life. So, these are the results of our 2-year project, run on a shoestring, run entirely free of charge. None of us have charged a penny for our time. Because we have been at it now for 2 years and secured asylum for 95% of our people, we felt it was time for us to, move on, essentially, and tackle a much bigger crisis, which is the climate migrant crisis, which I'll touch on in a moment. But in the meantime, I did say that 5% of our people are still trapped, including this young lady on the left, Najiba, who is the fighter pilot. She's sort of a lady in waiting. It'll take possibly 6 to 9 months more to get her asylum in Australia. And if Najiba and other girls are unable to extend their visas, then they will be deported in November, and they will probably get hunted down and killed by the Taliban. So I am going to ask each and every one of you in the room to consider making a donation to this, so that we all together today collaboratively can save lives, in the full knowledge that 100% of what you give will go to this. We have, the charity has bigger plans to provide education to girls in Afghanistan, to those who are unable to escape the country. And we've been approached by a school that has 300 girls that needs funding for its running costs, and also laptops or tablets for the girls. And then once we've secured asylum for people, we need to fund their flights. There's another, I think, $18,000 that's got to go out in the next couple of weeks to secure some asylum to the US through a legal firm here. I'm so sorry. There's so much at stake for me. Anyway, so this is the QR code here. If any of you feel minded to learn more about this work that we're doing, or to make a contribution, and this QR code will take you directly to the GoFundMe campaign, and you'll see that some people have donated $20, some people have donated $10,000, and each and every single cent will actually have a direct impact. So I invite you to please help in this important and crucially important mission. So what's next for us? Climate change. Climate crisis. Sorry, I learned half an hour ago. The climate crisis is affecting all of us. It's disproportionately affecting countries in the north of Africa and in the Middle East, both from the perspective of the global warming, but also because these countries are in the front line of the climate migrant crisis. Most of these people who are displaced are trying to get into Europe. Many of them are piling up on the shores of Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and elsewhere. I'm sure most of you are aware of the crisis that's unfurling in the Mediterranean. And in fact, Tunisia, a tiny, tiny country in North Africa, is now receiving the brunt of these migrants. Most of them are probably not climate migrants, they're probably economic migrants, but this is there's 77,000 of them turned up in Tunisia in the last couple of months. And this is a trickle compared to the tsunami that's heading their way, our way, your way. So we tapped into the GEDI Brain Trust and we came up with a strategy that seeks to address this issue, investing in climate action, companies that can slow global warming, companies that can help them deal with the climate migrant crisis. So digital solutions for energy, for mental health and well-being, education, finance, and access to online jobs. And this was very much informed by our work with the Afghan refugees in Pakistan. Now, I've always been a great proponent of women, and I've always said that if you want to get something done, you must invest in women. But nowhere is this more true than in the region of North Africa, where there is an Arab female renaissance underway, something that hasn't really been covered in the Western media. But now, most graduates are women. Most people from the region undergoing third-level education, often at Berkeley or Stanford or Harvard or Oxford or Cambridge, are also women. Nearly half of them are studying the STEM subjects, and they're coming back to the region brimming full of ideas, but they're not getting funded. I think many of you in the room will know that only 1.9% of venture capital funding globally goes to female founders. I think it's 2.1% in the US last year. But in the region of the Middle East and North Africa, it's only 1.3%. And if I may say so, the female founders that I've met there are more driven, more committed, and rather less lazy than some of the men in the region. So we've come together to raise and launch a $60 million fund, which is currently in formation. And we've put together a pretty strong investment team to deliver our investment strategy. And this is the team, of course, I'm a part of it. I'm the ESG person. But Maha Al-Fahim is probably the most respected Arab female investor. And then we have Dr. Elizabeth Adonizio, who's a real Jedi. She's a naval commander, as a reservist naval commander with 120 men under her command when she's not investing. And then Ida Birhalta, who is co-head of the largest female-led family office in the Middle East. This is Maha's track record. She's deployed $200 million in the last 12 years and has a stellar track record in the areas where we're looking to invest. So mental health and well-being, climate tech, ag tech, fintech and so on. And this is an example of three female-founded businesses that are flourishing that she's invested in the region. This is our GEDI network, and I'm going to invite all of you at the end of this to join us. We are 220 strong at the moment, movers and shakers from Silicon Valley, and it's a global network. On the left, we have the women who are our local venture partners, and we have the leading investment banker or private equity person or venture capitalist in each country where we're going to be investing, and they're already sourcing pipeline for us. We've already got a number here. This is just a tiny handful out of the 600 that we've identified globally and the 150 in the region. And our strategy, because it dovetails with national economic plans and can help these countries deliver on their UN SDG goals and the Paris Agreement, we believe that these countries are going to get behind the companies that we're investing in with grants, with public-private partnerships, and help us leverage their impact as well as profits. So just to wrap it up, thank you all very much. Please stay in touch. Everybody can become a Jedi. At this point, it's important to remember that the climate crisis is a global one. It's not just an American one. Hydrogen solutions in America, very, very important. Let's take them to North Africa. Let's take them to these fossil fuel economies, because we live in just one world and we need to fix the whole world. So please partner with us. And also, again, if you feel moved to help me keep these women alive, that little QR code there hopefully works and can get you back to the GoFundMe campaign if you haven't already got there. Thank you so much. God bless.